second that.
Ms. Green, if you would call the roll, please.
Mr. Wilson?
Yes.
Mr. Kish?
Yes.
Mr. Walford?
Yes.
Mr. Williford?
Yes.
Chairwoman Bettman?
Yes,
Motion carries.
thank you. Agenda item 3, amended site and landscape plan 116 Washington Boulevard, filed by Dooley Homes LLC. Ms. Pulley?
Good evening.
Good
The
evening.
applicant, Dooley Homes LLC, is seeking amended site and landscape plan approval to demolish an existing 5,320 square feet building located at 116 Washington Boulevard. The applicant would like to construct a new two-story, 5,940 square feet building to be used as office/retail space and provide 16 on-site parking spaces. The property is zoned commercial general. The structure located on site was constructed in 1940 and served as a sportsman's tavern for many years. The staff is recommending that the City of Laurel Planning Commission approve the amended site and landscape plan application for 116 Washington Boulevard, Laurel, Maryland, 20707 with the following conditions. The applicant shall provide all utility disconnect letters and obtain a City of Laurel demolition permit prior to start of demolition of the existing building. The applicant shall pay all required city impact fees at the time of building permit application submittal. The applicant shall obtain sediment erosion control plan approval from Prince George's County Soil Conservation District prior to applying for a City of Laurel grading permit. The applicant shall receive stormwater management technical plan approval or an exemption letter from Prince George's County and water and sewer plan approval from Washington Suburban Sanitary Commission prior to the issuance of City of Laurel site work permit. The applicant shall obtain a City of Laurel right-of-way permit prior to conducting any work in city right-of-ways and prior to the issuance of a building permit. The applicant shall obtain a construction interest permit from the Maryland State Highway Administration, SHA, and provide a copy of approved permit to the city prior to commencement of the work. The applicant shall obtain all required permits and plans approval for all work that will be conducted on US Route 1 from the Maryland State Highway Administration. The trash dumpster shall be enclosed by a structure containing 4 sides of which may open but shall contain a self-lashing device made from masonry or wood. The 15-foot wide public alley shall be repaved by the applicant with the necessary deep patch repair and 2-inch mill and asphalt overlay. The paving shall be done once the reconstruction of the building is completed. The property owner and each future tenant shall obtain use and occupancy permits prior to operate any business at the property, and all exterior building signage requires separate City of Laurel approvals and permits as well. Thank you.
Thank you. Questions for Ms. Pulley or staff?
I have a couple.
Mr. Wilson?
I didn't see any parking analysis in your report.
Yeah, no, I didn't provide parking analysis, but for the site, they're providing 16 parking spaces for the property, and it's based off of the analysis for the retail space of 1 space per 400 square feet, and the space, and for office space, 1 space for 2,000 feet over.
So an exception would not be required in this case? The
No,
16 met the
code.
requirements?
So what's on the drawing, you guys concur with? I just want to make, that's their analysis. I just want to make sure.
Oh, yes, sir.
You concur with this analysis and it's within
The code regulations.
Thank you. That's all the questions I have.
Yeah.
What is your question, John? Councilman Smalls?
Yes, just a couple. Ms. Pulley, can you point out to us where the ingress egress access will be
The
for
ingress,
the project?
the ingress egress, I don't have a pointer, but it would be if you're coming off of Route 1 and then there's a white building, the white building, they'll turn
That's
left into that alleyway
alleyway.
and then they'll go to the parking right there.
okay. So that's the only.
It won't work. Oh, it won't work.
Yeah, I know where you're talking about. I
yeah,
can clearly
but that's
see
the
it.
only
and that's what I
ingress
was-
and egress way for that property off of Route 1 right there.
That's
Our-
that way coming in.
Right, one way coming in, one way going out, and then they could go out the backside of route, that alley to, what, thank you.
Okay. I looked at on page 2, the rendering of the building, and I'd certainly like to have staff pay close attention to, again, the design standards for the city in general, but particularly in keeping with that area, that, you know, there be some general design uniformity to the area, while still obviously keeping into account some uniqueness, I'm sure, that the applicant will want to put into the project. But you know, since we get, or I should say the commission gets, one shot at this, I'd certainly like to ensure as best possible that this is not a glass front building when all our other buildings, new construction, are bricked, and that you get where I'm going.
Yes, sir.
Just to follow up on that, the rendering that we're seeing, Councilman Smalls, to your point, which I appreciate, my learning on this was when Walgreens first came in, and we looked at that. But that's one of the things that in the rendering I appreciated was the brick front
Right.
and all of that. So is that part of the proposal?
Yes, the applicant is here, but they are proposing like a brick front with some, windows and
The overhang.
the
I see.
overhang of the awnings and so forth.
Okay. I was thinking it would definitely be an upgrade to
What was there?
to right now what is currently there. So.
Yes, ma'am.
Councilman Smalls, thank you.
A bare parking lot would be an upgrade.
Yes. Any other questions?
Just that, and again, looking at the second page, the layout, retail 1, retail 2, is that all the retail in the back part of the, is that just the first floor?
As of right now, what was illustrated to me, and it's possible it could change, they're looking to have maybe 1 or 2 retail spaces with the office space as well. But as of right now, we don't know what type of retail or office will be there
Sure,
once it's constructed.
Would you
Yeah.
just, for the record, mind just very generally and quickly, in the CG zone, what kind of uses are permitted?
The CG zone is our most flexible zone, so therefore we have office uses, various type of retail uses, whether it's shopping, grocery stores, I don't want to say massage parlors, but health food stores, health spas, restaurants, nail salons, hair salons. So it's a wide variety of different type of uses that can go there. Some intense, some not so intense. Hopefully it'll be a type of use that's not really seen throughout the city.
That's what we're hoping. Yes. Thank you.
Thank
Thank you,
you.
Madam Chair.
We do not have anyone currently signed up. We do have the applicant here to speak. Are there any questions for the applicant? Okay. I would like to officially open the public hearing on this application. Is there anyone here that would like to speak or any questions? Could I ask you to please come to the mic, state your name and address? Thank you.
I'm just a little more curious about the parking requirements for businesses. Like, my building is right behind there, and I'm trying to open 1,000 square feet and we retire 17 parking spaces.
Thank you. First, could I ask you to state your name and address for the record?
Cecil Dionot. I live at 113 Irving Street, Laurel, Maryland, 20707.
Thank you. Either Mr. Brock or Ms. Pulley, did you hear his, obviously, I understand, if you could
I
help to
think he
answer
was
him.
inquiring about parking spaces. As I spoke to Mr. Danoff several times, he's in the process of opening a restaurant, and I explained to him restaurant parking is a bit different from what Mr. Ash is trying to do. For his space, it's usually 1 seat per 4 parking spaces or something of that nature. For a restaurant, it's a much more intensive use. So I explained it to him, and I'm more than welcome to explain it to him again at a specific time.
I'm sorry, go I was just saying, if you open a retail business, and like you said, there's a variety of retail businesses, and you have 4,300 square feet, I mean, what kind of business can you really open going with that formula? I mean, is there going to be a limited business, like just offices, where the requirements are much less than maybe a restaurant, for instance?
As of right now, I doubt that it's going to be a restaurant. He hasn't stated that it will be a restaurant. However, when use and occupancy permits come in, then another detailed parking analysis will be done to ensure that there's enough parking on site. It just won't automatically be signed off.
Right. So to your point, right now, what we are approving here this evening is just an amended site and landscape plan. We are approving the construction of the build. Please correct me if I misstate anything. We are approving tonight the construction of a building, the landscape, the outside, those things that Sarah showed you there. The reason Ms. Pulley went through the detailed list of the recommendations from the staff are that this is a very much a starting point. They're approving the building, setting out the recommendations or the requirements to get the building built. And once the building has a shell in it, approving or requesting and approving a use and occupancy permit will then require additional analysis.
Right. My question was, though, what kind of businesses would fill 4,300 square feet? And maybe what kind of parking requirement under the minimum standards? Like, an office requires how many square feet?
No, an office, okay, she can answer that. I was going to say it's very, very small compared to restaurant.
Right,
Because
once
restaurant,
again-
you're hoping to have
Once
a lot of
again,
people at the same time.
you know, it varies on what type of uses that can go in there. If a more intensive use wanted to go in there, say if for a nail salon or a hair salon, that requires more parking because it's based on how many chairs you may have. So it all depends really on what type of use that wants to go in there, and then we would do the analysis. I'm not sure what Mr. Ash and his family has in store for what wants to go there. But what I do know, based off what's being approved here tonight, we're approving the amended site and landscape plan application where they're getting approved, hopefully proposing to tear down what's existing, construct a new building, provide 16 on-site parking spaces. Now, when it comes to someone wanting to go into the space, whether it's a restaurant, hair salon, small health food store, health spa, we will have to look at the parking criterion and ensure that they meet all the parking requirements. So, but if you have any other questions or want more information, you can feel free to call me.
But
like
Christian,
always do.
you could view what currently our regulations are based on different occupancy. There is a formula for what the parking is based on what it is. So they could share that with you also.
Yeah.
I was just curious.
Thank you.
But if I could, one way to think about it is that now that they've decided to go with this site plan, that really has limited the marketability of that building. So right now with this, I would say this is minimum parking, right? Or
Correct.
doggone close to it.
Yes.
So that means that whoever owns the building in the future would try to put a restaurant in there, it'd be a no-go.
All right.
Yeah.
All right,
It's
thank
just
you.
one of the choices you have to make as you walk through the steps of this process.
I was just curious.
No? Well, thank you very much. Anyone else wishing to speak during the public hearing? Hearing and seeing none, I will close the public hearing on this application. And if there are no further questions, I will entertain a motion.
I will move to approve the amended site plan. Yeah, I'm just looking for the numbers. The amended site plan and landscape plan for 116 Washington Boulevard, filed by the applicant with the technical report attached, and recommend approval also at the same time of resolution 16-05-PC.
And I second that.
Thank you. Ms. Green, if you would call the roll, please.
Mr. Wilson,
Yes.
Mr. Kish,
Yes.
Mr. Walford,
Yes.
Mr. Williford,
Yes.
Chairwoman Bettman,
Yes,
motion carries.
thank you. Any other business?
Yeah, I'd like to bring up something. I think it's relative to this and to some of these other things. So I think it had first reading last night, the master plan. I think it'll have potentially final
25th.
25th. And in there is, this is part of the zone, right? This area that's part of the Route 1 complex. But one of the things that we're kind of limited here, and it's something we're going to have to think about, and I'd rather do it before we get somebody asking us, is parking waivers in this sector. I mean, I was just thinking about this when the gentleman asked about it. We've been pretty good about giving parking waivers on Main Street and some other places. But in this area, I don't know where they go. I think if some of you may recall, we had the funeral home a while back, right? And I guess that never went through for economic reasons, but we went through that drill, if you recall, where we had one of the neighbors, was going to provide them whatever you have to do legally to let people park there. But I think as we think about the redevelopment in this sector of the city, this is an area where we don't have a lot of choices for parking. The only place I can think of that there might be some overflow parking for things like restaurants and maybe higher use would be on Fred Frederick's empty land there, next to the old bank, in the center, kind of across the street, but they'd have to work some sort of deal. So we're going to have to deal with that. It's going to be really hard, I think, as this part of town revitalizes to get the parking that they need. And, urban areas deal with this all the time. You got to go down the street and park. You're not going to be able to park. So anyhow, I think it's something we're going to have to think about strategically so that as we have to make these decisions, we've got some basis for doing it. There's zones like perhaps Main Street down to the train station and then down Route 1 where we're going to have one criteria for parking and potentially elsewhere because staff's going to go crazy trying to figure out where our heads will be on a case by case. So I just bring that up we'll think about it, but maybe when we come back in the fall, it's something we ought to take up. I don't know how best to address it, but maybe some guidelines where we've kind of thought our way through it. And again, we'll do like we always do and make a choice and a decision as humans sitting up here. But it's probably something to get out and think about because they're really in a bind at these kind of places.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I think you're absolutely right, Rick. One current option may be the commuter lot at the train station, depending on the availability of that after hours. But yeah, there's some consideration, and certainly no one is interested that I'm aware of in building any kind of structured parking. It's too expensive, I agree. With the exception, and this, who knows where it is, maybe Jack or Marty can shed some light on it with the train station project.
Yes.
How far in the future that is, will we all be still around?
Well, you might be, but I won't speak for me.
Pardon me?
If I may, the train station actually something you might want to think about, especially for this kind of business after hours, because it is empty after 6 o'clock or something like that. And according to the zoning rules of Laurel, if you're within 500 feet of the train station, you can actually use that as part of your parking requirements. Am I correct or right?
I don't know.
They're the experts.
Currently, the only satellite parking allowed is for a church or house of worship. That's the only under the current regulation, that's the only allowable satellite parking. So you would have to have parking on the parcel on which the land use is currently occupied.
But that is something that,
The code, and it says if you're within 500 feet of a public parking, you can utilize that as part of your parking space. There's a code in the city of Laurel code.
This is the guy that writes the code.
No.
You might want to, I'm just saying, check into that.
So to continue, like at downtown Silver Spring, right? You got all the Ellsworth Avenue restaurants. They obviously aren't parking themselves.
Right.
So you've got those commuter lots in effect and the lots from the county government, right? That's, right there. And they must have some way of counting those.
I'm sure they allowed after 5 o'clock. They're allowed open for public use. We have, now that you brought it up, we have looked at the land development code, and we do have some criteria proposed for parking modifications.
That's maybe something we
Well,
take
that's-
up in the fall.
That may very well be, because to Rick's point, and to me, the difference is, and I think, we touched on it when Walgreens was coming in, the difference between a Main Street waiver and a waiver in this quadrant, especially if we're talking about a restaurant for evening or something, is the safety aspect. And that's what we brought up when the funeral home was being proposed, when Denny's was going to offer them parking across the street. One of our concerns was the safety. So, Rick, I appreciate you bringing that up. And for the majority of our time is usually we come in, we just look at an agenda. So I would appreciate us having the ability to look at something maybe a little bit more forward thinking that will then, again, to your point, help us as things do come up, because we're looking forward to that area being developed or redeveloped or improved in many ways. And so it would help us, and it would also help us avoid something similar to the garbage enclosure thing, how that came up and then, impacted so many at one time, and then we kind of changed that midway. So I appreciate that. And if you all could give that some thought, maybe come fall, present us with something that we could look at and talk about.
We do have that prepared for you.
Outstanding.
Yeah, something that talks about guidelines, and then of course we get to decide if we're going to stay in the guidelines or not as a body.
Right.
I don't want to make it just flat, one size fits all. But if you have a restaurant like this gentleman wants to do, or whatever is going to happen in this building, downstream. So I think that would be great. And if there's other things like that you guys want to, especially when we have these short agendas, if we have another short one, we can tack it on there and then kind of give it a.
You could just do a work session.
Okay,
Thank you.
that'd be great.
One more thing I'd like to point out is the parking requirement, the actual space size on that side of Laurel. I think, I can't remember the exact measurements, but I think it's something like 17 feet by 9 feet, versus the Mark train station or the City of Laurel parking is like 2 feet shorter in each dimension.
Well, thank you for bringing
Yeah,
that up. And that's all stuff that, as we bring this forward to talk about, those are things that we definitely can look
I mean,
at.
it's probably an old law built there or something, but the parking space has to be bigger.
It's
on that
compact
side.
first rate
Great.
there.
Thank you very much. Any other comments or business? Hearing none? The meeting is adjourned. Thank you all.